Good afternoon, everybody. I'm so excited to be joining Burst into Books this afternoon. So, I am Dr. Femi Skanes. I am the founder and CEO of Leadership Edge LLC. I'm here with my friend Jarima today, and we are talking about supporting struggling teen readers. And if you've ever had a child, a student, a niece, a nephew who has been a struggling teen reader, then you know just how frustrating this can be. So, just a little bit of background about me. I am currently a high school administrator in Chicago Public Schools. I have served as an elementary reading teacher, I've served as a high school reading teacher, I have served as um, elementary literacy coach, a high school reading department chair. So I have been doing this reading thing for quite some time. So just a little bit of background knowledge. And I am the mom to three teens. One of them who, definitely had his own challenges with reading, and especially reading in school, and we're going to talk about that a little bit today, because reading in school definitely is different than reading at home. So that's just a little bit of background about me. I do actually have a master's in reading, so by trade I am a reading specialist. I have actually trained plenty of other teachers to become reading specialists. So today we're going to talk about supporting struggling teen readers. And so if you found yourself being frustrated, have no fear. We're going to talk about some very practical things that you can do today to support your struggling teens. So, let's begin really talking about, why do you describe your teen as a struggling reader? Okay, so when we say struggling reader, that can mean so many different things. Are they struggling because they don't like to read? Do you think that they're struggling because when they read, they don't know many of the words? Are they struggling because when they read, they don't understand what they've read? Do they have a hard time focusing when they're actually reading, or they don't know the meaning of many of the words? So it's so many different ways that we can, when we think about what a struggling reader is, there are so many different ways that we can describe it. So if you are tuning in today, if you are feeling brave enough, if you are struggling with your own child being, or a child close to you or teen close to you being a struggling reader, feel free to drop it in the chat, and let's begin to really talk about, why do you think that they are a struggling reader? So, when we begin to talk about reading, there are five, actually six components to reading, and all of these components actually make a really understanding all five, and then I call it five and a bonus, all six parts of reading really helps you to dive deeper into why your young person might be struggling with reading. So the five parts are phonemic awareness, phonics, vocabulary, and comprehension. And each one of comprehension and fluency. And so each of them play a very different role when we start to talk about reading. And so, phonemic awareness is just understanding that words have, or that letters have sounds. Okay. So, for example, the letter B. We know that the letter B makes B. Okay, that's what phonemic awareness is, understanding that every letter in the alphabet has a sound. Phonics is when, very closely related to phonemic awareness, is when you see the written letter and then understand that it's a sound. So if you say to your child the letter B, or to a young, or to really, we start this with kids very early on, what sound does the letter B make? And then the child says "buh." That's phonemic awareness. Phonics is when you actually show the child the letter B. So you write the letter B, and then you say, let's look at this letter. What's the name of it, and what sound does that make? So phonics and phonemic awareness are the sounds. Vocabulary is simply how many words do kids know, right? Or how many, just the words that are in your language. Comprehension is understanding what you've read. And then fluency is something that we don't often talk about, but it's very critical in the reading process. And fluency is how many words can you read per minute? And fluency is so critically important because fluency actually has a direct link to comprehension. So, for example, if you are reading, the boy jumped over the moon. I just said that fluently. The boy jumped over the moon. But if you read it like this, the boy jumped over the moon. When you read it choppy like that, it takes you a longer time for your brain to be able to comprehend it. And so we want to focus today on fluency because fluency has a lot to do with kids' comprehension. And then there's the bonus one. So again, so far we have the 5 parts to reading. We have phonemic awareness, phonics, vocabulary, comprehension, and fluency. And so if we go back to that question that I asked, why is your child a struggling reader? Or why do you think that they're a struggling reader? Even a parent can say, I don't know if my child knows enough words, or I don't know if they comprehend, or when I hear them read out loud, I hear them reading choppy. But there's this bonus one that I think in fact, the research says it, and I know it just from being in education for so long, that writing is critically an important part of the reading process. And so when you think about reading, sometimes we think about reading and writing being separate, but reading and writing are in the same family. Reading and writing are like peanut butter and jelly. Okay, they go together, and so we don't want to leave writing out as part of the literacy and reading process. And so, when we think about all of the components of reading, here's what we need to know, that there is an input and there's an output. So, for spoken language or for literacy, when we're speaking, the input is when listening, the output is speaking, right? So, we have to teach young people how to be quiet and actually listen to what's being said. And after they listen, then we ask them to speak about what they just heard. That's the input output for spoken literacy. For written literacy, the input is reading and the output is writing. And so again, we don't want to separate writing from reading because they're again peanut butter and jelly. So in fact, we don't want to leave out any of these things. Okay. We got to teach young people how to listen. And then we have to teach them to speak about what they just heard. We have to teach them how to read. And then when they read, they should also be writing about what they're reading. So here's some things that we know. The more that teens read, the better that they get at reading. It's just that simple. The more that you do anything, the better that you get. The more that they practice basketball, the better they become at basketball. The more that they play Uno, the better they become at Uno. It is the same thing with reading, okay? Kids don't become better at reading by talking about reading. They become better at reading because they actually read. We know that the more teens read, the more words that they acquire. One quick strategy that you can do to help your kids expand their vocabulary when they're reading, I use something called the box method. When they come to a word that's unfamiliar to them, put a box around it. They can even do something like get index cards or get a notebook. And when they come to a word that they don't know, they put a box around it. They put it on their index card, they put it in their notebook, and they write down the meaning. Now, don't forget we talked about input, output, right? So the input is they read, they learn a new word. The output is the writing. So you tell them, okay, you just learned a new word. The next time that you write, see if you can incorporate that word into your writing, because you don't want you input and output go together. They have to actually practice with the words. We know that the more teens read, the more fluent they become. And the more teens read, the more they are able to sustain reading for long periods of time. So have you ever watched your child and they're like, this is boring. I don't want to do this. Well, they're not going to want to do it if we're not having them to practice reading for longer periods of time. And so now we got to talk openly and honestly about setting the conditions for healthy reading environments. And so there are some questions that I just want you all to think about and I want you to ponder on your own. And so the first question is, how much time do adults spend reading at home? So when you think about the adults in your house, how much time do the adults actually spend reading at home? If we dig a little bit deeper, how much time do kids see adults reading at home? I'm not talking about the reading that we do on social media. I'm not talking about when we have we have our phones in our hands and we're scrolling articles. I'm talking about picking up a book, picking up a newspaper, picking up a magazine, picking up an article. Do kids see us actually reading? The reason that this is important is because, just like with everything else, we set the foundation for the expected behavior. It's very difficult for us to encourage kids to read if they never see us reading. How many books are available in your home? Right. So look around your house. Do you have a bookshelf? Do you have books on it? Can you talk about the books that you've actually read? Now, think about how our limits set on technology time. So, in your house, I know that there are teens. I actually know that we're in the midst of a pandemic, and sometimes you need a little bit of a break. But I would say that parents really need to be setting limits on technology time, especially now that we are in the midst of a pandemic and most kids are going to school virtually. They're doing remote learning. They're on computers all day long. There is still something to be said about a book in hand, an article in the hand, a magazine in the hand, where kids are actually having to feel and to touch, having a book in your actual hand. How much time in your house is spent on conversations that promote healthy dialogue? I'm not talking about, hey, hey, June, did you wash the dishes? Did you do this? Did you do that? How much time do you all spend in your house actually just having conversations about things, whether it's politics, whether it's nature? What are your thoughts on global warming? Why do the leaves fall off the trees? The reason that that is so important is, again, remember that there's input and there's output. That helps them learn how to listen, and then helps them learn how to articulate their thoughts and speak. That's also a good time for them to practice some of those new vocabulary words, going back to that box method. And then, do you attend family events that promote healthy literacy? So let's talk about some things. What are some family events that promote healthy literacy? Museums. When you go to museums and kids walk around, make them read the placards that are in front, of the different artifacts. That's an event that promotes healthy literacy. Other things that you all can do, even at festivals, having them read things. So there's a little one that parents may not even think about. There are actually two quick strategies of things that parents can do that help teens promote healthy literacy. Going to the grocery store, having them to write out the list, having them to talk about the list. That is actually a literacy event. If we dive a little deeper, which is another session, you can also incorporate the math in it, right? But having them to read and do comparisons. When I'm reading the back of the box, is it cheaper for me to get the Walmart brand of macaroni, or is it cheaper for me to get the brand name? Why is that? How's that literacy? Well, they're reading, they're comparing. Okay, that's what literacy looks like in the real world. Another place is when you go out to dinner. Don't let them look at the pictures on the menu. Have them read. Make sure that they can that they actually are comprehending. There are so many real opportunities in life for kids to practice literacy in the real world, and it's important for us to also begin to redefine what literacy looks like. A lot of times we think that it is just sitting in school reading a book, but literacy is everywhere, and so don't let your young people opt out of those opportunities to read in the real world. Reading fluency. So again, I talked about reading fluency. The number of words per minute that a young person can read is critically important. So by the time, so the teen age starts right around seventh or eighth grade. Okay. So on the left side of this diagram, we have how many words per minute that they should be able to read when they're reading silently. On the right side of this, we have how many words per minute that they should be able to read when they're reading orally. By the time that they are in seventh grade, they should be hovering around reading about 200 words per minute when they're reading silently. Again, why does this matter? Because if kids read choppy like this, it breaks down their comprehension. That's why fluency matters. Okay. So by the time they're in seventh grade, they should be up to about 200 words per minute when they're reading silently. By the time that they're seniors in high school, they should be up to about 250 words per minute. Now, oral reading fluency is significantly slower than silent reading comprehension. So by the time that they're in eighth grade, seventh, eighth grade, they should be able to read 150 words per minute aloud, which is a good indicator of then how many words per minute that they can read silently. And so you might be asking, well, how am I supposed to know how many words per minute that they can do? There are actually 2 free tests that you can give them online. The directions are right there. That will drop the directions in the chat as well. You all can click on those links. And so there's a freereadingtest.com. And then there is readinglength.com. Both of them actually are oral fluency tests that you can give your child to see how many words per minute can you actually read when you're reading out loud. It'll help you understand a lot about the reading behaviors. And these also have a few comprehension questions that you can ask them, because not only do you want to know how many words per minute they can read, but you want to make sure that they understand what they're reading when they're actually reading. So again, that reading fluency is so critical. Now, what are some actual steps for improvement when we're talking about improving literacy in teens? Number one is time. Make time for reading for everybody. That means sometimes we got to cut off the TV, and then we have to just say, you know what? Kind of old school. Remember when we were kids, it was like drop everything and read. Practice that at your house. Sunday afternoons, Sunday evenings, or Tuesday evening. Cut off those TVs, put down those cell phones for a minute, and spend 30 minutes to an hour, everybody reading what they want to read. Now, parents, we have to, when kids get to about 12 or 13 years old, we have to stop dictating exactly what they're reading, okay? So we'll say things like, oh, that's not a good book. When you have a struggling reader, you have to allow some autonomy for them to be able to read what interests them. In fact, by the time we're adults, nobody reads things that aren't interesting to them unless you are working at school. But in your personal life, you read things that interest you. If you want to support a struggling reader, let them read things that are interesting to them. Specifically, so think about boys. We just know the research says that boys tend not to enjoy reading the same way that teen boys tend not to enjoy reading the same way that girls do. So for example, when my son was younger, he was not a fan of reading, but he was always a fan of wrestling. WWE was his thing. And so I got him a subscription to the WWE the WWE magazine. And my son has also always been an avid sports fan. So I would get him books about sports. I would get him the WWE magazine, and he would actually read it because those are the things that interest him. If you put Shakespeare in front of him, then or now, he still was not going to read it because it wasn't interesting. Shared literacy. Find some family reading materials. Find something that you all can read together. Find something that interests you all. Mom, dad, you say, okay, you know what? We're going to read chapter 1 by the end of this week, and then we're going to talk about it together. That way, you're also modeling as a parent that reading is important. Limitations. Limit the time on social media with all of the video scrolling. Now, we do have to be honest with ourselves to say that social media does present opportunities to read. So I'm not saying that young people should never be on social media. We're on social media, but limit with just the video scrolling, because a lot of struggling readers have learned to compensate specifically because they can watch videos and get the same information. And so that has its place, but we also want to make sure that they're finding opportunities to read. And so if they're on social media and they're telling you that they're reading an article, fine, then talk to me about it. But if all they're ever doing is looking at videos, then that's not going to develop good reading habits. Again, another one, re-envisioning, using technology to promote reading. There are apps like Kindle. They're all different kinds of reading apps. And so technology is good for young people when they're reading online. Books are good, but we do know that a lot of reading now takes place with our technology. And so don't completely take it away, but just re-envision how we're using it. A very critical part to literacy development is conversations. Make sure that you are having time for healthy conversations in your house. I can't say this enough. There are so many things that you can learn about your young people by specifically just making time for good, healthy family conversations. And then lastly, using audio supports. Um, so on one hand, I know I'm talking about really limiting social media use, not taking it away, but definitely putting some parameters on how we're using it, but also using audio supports. And so when I say audio supports, what do I mean? Audio books are amazing for struggling readers. And so some ways that you can use audiobooks, remember there's input and there's output. Audiobooks help them listen. Audiobooks, they can begin to speak about what they've heard. Audiobooks help to build fluency. So take, for example, if they are listening to an audio book, tell them, hey, you can use the audio book, listen to the first chapter of it, and then I want you to find 2 pages that you're going to read out loud, right? So after they've listened to the audio book, they've heard the book being read fluently. Now give them a chance to practice it with actually having to read aloud. When I was a high school reading teacher, this was a strategy that I used all the time with my struggling teen readers. And those audio books, I have seen kids or teenagers grow tremendously from audio supports. So again, time, shared literacy, limitations of social media, but also re-envisioning how we use technology, time for conversations, and audio supports. I just want to encourage you all to know, don't get too frustrated, don't give up. It's never too late to get better as a reader. So if you have a struggling teen reader, even if they're in high school and you're like, oh my God, they're 15, 16 years old and they're still struggling with reading, don't become discouraged. I promise you that those 6 strategies that I talked about, they actually work. The reason that this is so important for us to do this at home is because, believe it or not, kids don't spend enough time reading in school. Okay. I'm a school administrator. I'm telling you all what I know. Kids spend a lot of time doing work at school, but dedicated time to just read, they just don't spend enough time actually reading at school. So I encourage you all to practice these healthy reading habits at home. So I encourage you all to also stay in contact with Leadership Edge. If you have any questions about anything that I have said today, feel free to send me an email. If you want to talk to me privately, if you want to share with me some of the challenges that you might be having with your teen reader, email me. Really, just email me, talk to me about, what are some of the challenges. I can give you all suggestions to how you may be actually able to help your teen reader at home. So you can email me at leadershipedge2020@gmail.com. You can find me on Facebook at Leadership Edge LLC. You can find me on LinkedIn at Leadership Edge LLC. And if you want to hear more about how to support teen readers, if you just have questions, if you want to give me any kind of feedback, you can go to this link, tinyurl.com/LE interest. Once again, tinyurl.com/LE interest. You can find me in any of these ways, any of these media, and I am happy to answer questions for you all. If you work with an organization and you want to do some parent workshops on building healthy literacy skills, I have strategies on how to help build healthy communication skills in families, how to build healthy reading habits in families. Reach out to me any kind of way, and I'm happy to chat with you all. So this is just a little bit more about, again, some of the services that I offer. I offer services to school districts, to administrative teams, to parent groups, to churches, non-for-profit organizations, private groups. And so I really do believe that literacy is so important for our young people. Literacy helps to close the economic gap. Let me say that again. Healthy literacy habits help to close the economic gap for our people. So thank you all for spending just a little time with me this on a Saturday afternoon. I'm happy to take any questions. So if you all have any questions, you can drop them in the chat. Jarima is going to help facilitate those questions. But again, you can also email me at leadershipedge2020 at gmail.com. And Jarima, I'm ready for questions.
That was so awesome. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm actually going to pull up the question and that was posed so we can see it together. So this is the first question that was posed. So how do you get a child to read when they don't like suspense per se to build to climax? They just want to know what happened in the closing. They don't care for the details.
So my first question would be, what are they reading? And so a lot of times we think that kids have to just be reading. We think about our old school scholastic book fairs, and you went to the book fair, you got a book, and this is a mom that's asking, right? So we read things like the Babysitter's Club and Judy Blume because we enjoyed it. To be honest, boys don't typically enjoy fiction like girls enjoy fiction. And so I would say change what they're reading. And so if you're having them to read at home and you're just trying to build healthy reading habits, then they don't have to be reading fiction text. What is it that they're interested in? If they're interested in video games, then get them some nonfiction text about video games. If they're interested in nature, then get them some books about nature. This is an overgeneralization, but it's true 90% of the time. Male teens prefer nonfiction. So you find out what they're interested in, and then you begin to get some nonfiction text around the things that they're interested in.
Yeah, and I would just love to add, I'm someone, I love all types of genres, but I can say in teaching high school, many of my boy students love more like mysteries, or not even necessarily mysteries, but you think about detective, like I already know the ending. Let me just figure out how they got to that ending. You know what I mean? So maybe some books that are more like that, where it's more I don't know, detective type books, or trying to figure out the crime. Like I already know what happened. Let me figure out how it got to that point. So I think just kind of switching it up. Like you said, we can feel like, I know you spoke to CJ about like if they're not reading Shakespeare, they're not reading. But like no, they're reading as long as they're reading something that is of interest to them. Again, I put all the links in the chat. I actually have one question before we close out.
Okay.
During this time, many of us, even being a high school instructor, it's difficult, I think, to just get kids to have the motivation to read. So what would you say are maybe some motivational tips? Because I don't think sometimes it's like a lack of access. It's more of like, okay, even if I put in my house, okay, we're going to do a drop everything and read time or things like that. What would you say are some ways that we can maybe encourage our kids to even see the benefits and why they should be reading?
So to be honest, they may not see the benefit in it. Okay. Let me just be honest. They may not see the benefit in it, but they don't see the benefit in many things that we know is healthy for them. And so you still have to do it even if they don't see the benefit. So there are some ways that we can build motivation for young people to read. If we're honest with ourselves, one of the reasons that you'll see some teen readers struggle at home is because we haven't set the conditions for reading at home. They don't see grown people reading. And so we're expecting them to do something that they don't see us do. And so we already know that kids don't do what we say, they do what we do. And so they have to actually see us reading. If you are having some motivational issues, I would say start doing some shared readings at home. Start finding text that, kind of speaks to the whole family, and then begin to talk about it, and then couple it with some good conversation. And so, but parents, if we're expecting them to read something that they may not be interested in, then you may have to read something that you're not interested in. Let them pick the text and let them say that this is what we're going to read. I can guarantee you with my own son, whatever text he picks for us to do a shared reading, we never agree, right? So sometimes I have to bite the bullet and read the stuff that I don't want to read if it's going to help motivate him to read. And so some designated space. what's happening, and I could go on a tangent about what's happening with parents.
Mm.
We don't like to make our kids uncomfortable. We have gotten to the point that we love them so much that we don't want them to be uncomfortable. We want them to be comfortable all the time. But as adults, we're not comfortable all the time. The way that they get over the hurdle of being better readers is going through the discomfort of it.
Mm.
Okay, when you are struggling as a reader, it is uncomfortable when somebody is forcing you to read. They may not like it, but there are a lot of things that they don't like, but it's good for them. So you have to buckle down and say, and not necessarily berate them. But I will say that their self esteem is critically important when they're struggling readers. So be patient with them. Watch the words that you use when you speak to them, and don't make them feel bad because they're struggling. You know what? Be honest with them and say, like, listen, I get that you have this reading struggle, where all people have a struggle. Everybody has a struggle. This is just the one that you have. Once we identify that they have a struggle, say, listen, we're going to do these one, two, three things because you're struggling with it. But I promise you, if we do these things together, you're going to get better. I have seen I could tell stories after stories after stories of seeing teen readers grow when we practice some of the habits that I've talked about today.
I love it. And I love the note that you just said. Like, it's not even just necessarily about the access. What is the confidence that are we even building their confidence to want to read? Because you got to think about it. If I'm 16 and I know I'm not a great reader, I don't want to read, right? I don't want people to know that that's a deficit of mine. But if we make it a safe space for them at home to like practice and know that that's it. I think sometimes as parents, just to be transparent, I talk to parents and they're just as frustrated, right? It's
Right.
frustrating to them that their child has got to a certain space. But like you said, it's that ownership as a parent. What did I do to contribute? And what can I do to help them to get over this hurdle?
And
Well,
again, we can undo these habits, and
yeah.
so it's frustrating to have a teen reader. One other thing that I would like to suggest to families, when you have a struggling reader, do not make them read out loud without giving them a safe space to practice. If
Mm,
you want them to read something out loud, let them read it silently first, because that builds their confidence.
yes.
Let them read it silently first. Ask them, are there any words that they don't know? If they point out a word that they don't know, don't do all that. Sound it out. No, if they don't know it, tell them what the word is, tell them to practice it again, and then have them read out loud. Nobody likes to be put on the spot. Nobody likes to be embarrassed. Give them a chance to read it silently first. And remember, I talked about audiobooks. That's what audiobooks do. It helps them to hear it first and then go back and read it.
I love it. Well, I'm going to pull right back up really quick. So I want you all to take this information. I'll put it all in the chat. Even the links that was mentioned as far as ways that we can just even assess where our child is. I think for many of us, we may not even know where our child is, right? As far as the words they can read per minute, what is it that they may be struggling in. So Dr. Skanes gave so many amazing, amazing tips and strategies and also resources. I'm putting this back up here for those who are watching, who are educators, who have nonprofits, who many of the people who follow Births into Books are in literacy organizations or work in libraries. Please, please, please reach out to Dr. Skanes to have her come out. And again, her email is here. If you have any questions, if you're watching this later, just pose it. That way she can definitely answer those for you. And I'm just excited that you even took time today to talk to our viewers. This was amazing, amazing, amazing time.
Thank you. And
Yes.
you know what? Finally, my last tip.
Yeah.
Uh do a reading fluency test on yourself, parents, right? Like, get in your safe space and,
Yeah.
and test yourself and see how many words per minute, because it's just like typing, driving, anything else. If you don't practice doing it, see if you fall in those ranges too. And if your numbers are coming below what you would like them to come in, then we might have to, as parents, go back and spend some time reading, because honestly, social media has distracted some of us from spending some time with books. And so test yourself. I actually may go back and test myself just to see how many words per minute that I can read.
That's awesome. That's a really, really good push for myself as well. So I will definitely be doing that. So thank you all. Just so you all know, every month we do a lit talk. And so next month we will come back with another reading specialist that will give tips and tools. If you have not seen previous lit talks, visit our Births into Books YouTube channel. Also, you can go to our Births into Books Facebook page and you will see previous presentations but we will be doing this monthly just so we can ensure that our families are equipped with the strategies and things that they need, especially during this time where we may feel like some of our kids may be slipping. We want to make sure that we are able to be prepared to help them to get over whatever hurdles they may have. So again, thank you for joining us this afternoon. Thank you, Dr. Skanes. And
Thank
we
you.
will see you all next time.
Bye, everybody.